Okay, so color theory. Let's talk about it. So mostly what we're going to be discussing today, well, a couple things. One, hopefully what we're talking about today will help you make better decisions in terms of color when you're selecting color for your assignments. A lot of what we're going to talk about is kind of what the multiple variety of colors mean sort of subconsciously. So believe it or not, when people are choosing colors for things like the internet, web pages, logos, there's a reason why they pick the colors that they choose. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to be mostly talking about today is kind of the history behind the colors and what they all mean. Okay, so color theory. All right, color theory and Charley Harper. So the first probably 3 or 4 slides is kind of the recap of everything that we learned in kindergarten. I haven't been in kindergarten recently, so hopefully, I'm guessing none of you guys have either. So, but you probably know a majority of at least the first couple slides, but let's kind of go over it real quickly in terms of the basics of the color wheel and their relations to each other. Okay? So we have 3 different types of colors that we're going to talk about today, and when we actually move on to looking at the websites that we're going to talk about, they're all going to be organized in this fashion as well. So it's still, all these terms are still very widely used in terms of the graphic design industry. We use them all the time in my office as well. So as a designer, I'm constantly looking at color, and even though I don't use the websites we're going to talk about today, for the purposes of what we're talking about today, they become very helpful in terms of developing good patterns and good color schemes and why certain colors work well with each other and why some don't. Okay, so first we have primary colors. These are kind of the ones that you're probably most familiar with. These are going to be your red, blue, and yellow. So if you look at this color wheel right here on the screen, these are going to be the colors that kind of break up the wheel into thirds. Okay, so red, P, P, P. P stands for primary. Okay, so red, yellow, and blue, these are going to be all of our primary colors. All right, secondary colors are going to be the colors that are directly in between the primary colors. So in between red and yellow, we have orange. Okay, all the S's on the color wheel represent secondary colors. Okay, so I think we all kind of understand how that works. In between red and blue makes violet or purple. Okay, we've all probably mixed finger paints before. We all kind of understand the idea of mixing colors. All right, next, third and foremost, we have tertiary colors. Tertiary colors are going to be the middle colors between secondary and primary colors. Okay, so right here we have yellow, which is a primary color, and orange, which is a secondary color. In between those two, we have yellow-orange, which is going to be a tertiary color. And then you can actually continue to break these up even more and more and more, which is why we have pieces of software like we're going to look at today that breaks it down into the nearly infinite amounts of color that we have out there in the world. So they're all in some variation, variations of exactly what we see here on the color wheel. Okay? So next we have complementary colors. So can anybody without reading the screen, maybe for those that aren't looking at the screen, does anyone know what complementary colors are? Kind of opposites. If you kind of break it down into a nutshell, these are going to be colors opposite of each other on the color wheel. Okay, so opposite, or the complementary of yellow is going to be violet. The complementary of green is going to be red. So these are all complementary colors. Colors that complement each other are located opposite each other on the color wheel. So we can all kind of see how that works here. You have your primary color. So each complementary color is also composed of a primary color. Okay, so you're going to have a primary and a complementary. Primary being blue, the complementary being orange. Analogous colors. Analogous colors are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So if we go back to what we have here, analogous colors are going to be this light green and also the yellow-orange. So it's the colors directly next to each other on the color wheel. Usually they match each other well, but provide little contrast when used together. Okay, so these are often great colors to match up, but they provide little contrast. So depending on what it is that you're trying to achieve, that may be a really nice option for you. All right, so when you go to Home Depot and you grab one of those color swatches and it shows you, blue, and it shows you like 6 different variations of that blue, some lighter, some darker, those are all examples of analogous colors. Okay, so not just the colors that are left and right, but also the colors that are top and bottom when you break down the color wheel in this particular fashion. So it's usually adding more white and more, not black, actually just more white and more of the darker pigment of that color.
What's the name of the structure going from outer to inner? Is there a name?
Not that I'm aware of, because this structure could be, I've seen it like 3 and I've seen it like 100. When you actually look at the website today, you'll actually see, actually I take that back, it might pop up here in the lecture. It's not coming off the tip of my tongue, but it may pop up. It's on the tip of my tongue right now. It's typically when someone asks me a question on the spot, it kind of goes away from my mind. It'll pop up in the middle of my lecture or in the middle of the night at like 3 a.m. tonight. I'll say that's it. Okay, next we're going to talk about color systems. We're going to talk about RGB and we're going to talk about CMYK. So in terms of the difference between the two, RGB is the color system that you are seeing on your computer. On your cell phone, on your TV, anything that creates color through the emittance of light, okay? So anything that uses light to emit color. So TVs, computer monitors, your cell phones, all of these devices use the RGB color system. So when you guys are starting a new document in Illustrator or Photoshop or InDesign, one of the questions in that initial prompt is, what are you doing with this document? Are you going to be printing it, or is it going to be used for just viewing on the web? It's actually, we often skip right over the question, but it's actually a really important color. It's actually a really important question, because the way that the color, or depending on what answer you pick, it'll actually set you up with either RGB or a CMY color system. Okay, so if your intent is to print, you typically would want to use CMYK, and we'll talk about what CMYK is in a second, because these are the colors that are related to the ink in the printer. So how you view it on the screen may actually change a little bit, but most importantly, it's how it actually prints. So if you actually change your color system when you're working today in Illustrator to CMYK, because the intent is to print, you're going to have much truer print colors than you would probably see on your screen. Ideally, in the perfect world, you want to try to get as much harmony between these two different devices as possible. How many people here have created something on their screen, gone to print it out, and you're like, what the hell happened? This is not even close to what I thought I was going to get from my printer. Well, that's exactly the case. Most likely, what you were seeing on your screen was probably really, really far off, whereas the actual code that's embedded into your file is correct, and your printer is, just printing that code or that color combination. So, in my office, we actually have someone come in and calibrate all of our monitors. All of our monitors are Adobe, rated monitors where the colors are supposed to be as pure as possible, because as architects, it's really important that I say, hey boss, come here, come look at what I'm working on. Do you like what you see? Do you like the colors? And he says, yeah, absolutely. Well, I better make sure that what I print looks very similar or pretty darn close to what is on my screen. Otherwise, that could be a big problem, especially when you send all your drawings to your client or to the city to review, and they're completely different than what you actually saw on your screen. So these computers, probably here at school, I'm pretty sure they're not calibrated by any means, but typically with newer monitors, it's not too bad. It was a lot worse with older monitors, but that's kind of the simple breakdown between RGB and CMYK. So CMYK. CMYK represents the color system that we use for printers, as I just stated. So why is that? Typically when you buy a printer, it has 4 colors, unless you buy like a really good production printer that you're going to be doing lots of graphic prints on it, or really nice photo quality prints. Sometimes you can get 8 or even 12 inks in a particular printer, but typically in the the $100, $200 printer you're going to buy at Staples, it's going to come with 4 different color inks: cyan, magenta, yellow, and key. Key is the same thing as black. Now the reason why they actually include black is because when you actually mix cyan, magenta, and yellow, it does not create black. It actually creates kind of a medium to dark, maybe like a 75-80% gray. Okay, so that's why they include black, so that you can actually print a true black when you are printing. So remember, the difference between the two is that CMYK is actually created through pigments, so you're actually mixing pigments to get the color that you want, whereas RGB is used or is created by the filtration of light. Okay, so mixing pigments, actual pigments like paint and ink, versus the emittance of light. Okay, and again, this is used in print. So if I backtrack this a little bit, if you were to take a red light and a green light, and you held a red light, I held a green light, and we shined it up on the whiteboard, you would get yellow light by them actually crisscrossing. Okay, and then just like when you're in kindergarten, you mix the paints together, cyan and magenta, and you would get blue. All right, so now into the actual color theory and the meaning behind the colors that we experience on a daily basis. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a reason why people choose the colors that they pick, or at least people that do it for a living. I mean, a lot of times as non-professionals, when we're picking colors because we just kind of like them. Okay, my favorite color is blue, so I'm going to wear blue most of the time, and that's actually exactly why I wear blue most of the time, because I really like it. But there's actually a reason why a lot of people subconsciously choose the colors that you want. When I say subconsciously, it's not like, for example, when we talk about blue today, blue is the kind of the meaning behind blue is it's a stable color. It's kind of a symbolic of wealth and things of that nature. Well, when I wake up in the morning, I don't put on a blue shirt because I want to look wealthy. That's certainly not the case. I'm not wealthy, so that's not the reason why I pick it. But there is actually a subconscious feeling behind picking these colors. Even though you're not thinking those two things, subconsciously in your mind, that's kind of what you're hinting towards. So being deliberate when choosing colors, or color theory also means being deliberate when choosing colors. Make sure that the color you choose has the desired meaning or emotion. So these colors also provide or evoke emotion amongst people. Even though we don't automatically think it, it does, subconsciously. I'll say that word a lot today, subconsciously. So color theory at its core is about developing aesthetically pleasing color relationships. So that's hopefully our goal by the end of the day, is to at least start be thinking about this. I mean, you could absolutely take an entire semester or even a year-long class on color theory, and there are classes. I don't think maybe here at DVC, but definitely a lot of the larger universities, you can take an entire class on color theory. But we'll definitely just kind of, we'll kind of cover the basics in terms of what all of the colors mean. So, emotion. You're probably familiar with a lot of these terms. These are the specific color groups that are associated with emotions. And if you break them down into 3 color groups, you're going to break them down into warm, cool, and neutral. When you're going to Home Depot to pick out paints, you probably hear these terms all the time. And typically, a lot of the colors have warmer or cooler versions of each other. So even though it's green, you could have a much bluer green versus a more yellower green. That might be a warmer or cooler version of a particular color. But in general, the warm, cool, and neutral colors kind of fall into a few basic categories. So warm colors are going to include your reds, your yellows, and your oranges. And the reason why is because of, you kind of think of about like fire, okay? So fire evokes warmth. We all know that, okay? So warm colors evoke warmth, think fire, etc. Often have associated feelings of happiness and joy, okay? So a lot of yellows, and we'll actually, later in the lecture, in about 10 minutes, we're going to look at some case studies of websites, and we'll talk about kind of why they made some of the color choices they made back from like 1996 to now. These are websites that are all still in business. And there's a reason why a lot of them picked the colors that they did. So warm colors are often associated with happiness and joy. An example of this in 2009, after we went through this, horrible time of our economy, websites were really struggling, okay? The economy was bad, websites were struggling, people weren't selling things, and the overall morale of the United States and even a lot of the world was, wasn't the greatest. So a lot of the websites came together and they started to incorporate and inject colors like yellow, red, and orange into their website's overall theme to try to change how people felt when they viewed their website. And it was kind of you saw it in a lot of the big websites that you saw there. This was a kind of a change where they all came together and they changed little bits and pieces to allow the warm colors. Next, we have cool colors. Cool colors include blue, green, and purple. Okay, we all know that these colors evoke cool or kind of cold thoughts. Think water, cold weather, winter, etc. These are often used in professional, clean designs to emphasize authority, establishment, and trust. And this is part of what I was just mentioning in terms of the color blue, specifically, all right, and purple. So neutral colors. Neutral colors include gray, black, brown, and white. Okay, neutral colors don't necessarily evoke much feeling either way. Okay, so which is why they get termed the coin, or get coined the term neutral. Okay, and a lot of the times, if you have a color like gray, you can have a warm gray, and you can also have a cool gray. So as we all know, gray is the very in color right now. My wife has painted the entire house gray, and I am not allowed to speck of color in the entire house. I brought in a red pillow, gone. My dog sleeps on it now. So, but anyways, what I'm saying is that gray is a very popular color. And if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's and you go buy some paint, you know that you have about 100 different variations of gray. Well, you say, I'd like a nice gray for my house. Well, what kind of gray do you want? Do you want a warm gray? Do you want a cool gray? Okay, so the options are out there, and there's a reason why people pick the colors that we choose. So let's actually dive into the specific colors. Okay, so we'll talk about 8 different colors. First, red. Red is symbolic of fire and power. Okay, and we'll talk about kind of both the positive and the negative connotations of each of the colors that we mentioned today. So red is symbolic of fire and power. It's also associated with passion and importance. So you've all probably seen this, the red door. Okay, a lot of times you'll see people with bright red doors. This is symbolic of passion and importance, but it's also stimulates energy and excitement, and it's also a color of caution. Okay, and it's also used to kind of highlight focal points in like diagrams, or for instance a house. The entry of the house is highlighted red. This is saying, hey, this is the entry. Okay, so it stimulates energy and excitement, and some of the negative connotations include anger, emergency, and rage, which is why you see a stop sign and it's red. It's trying to catch your attention. Next, we have orange. Orange still kind of carries some of the very similar qualities of red, being that it is so closely related to it on the color wheel. It's just right next door, they're neighbors. Red is associated with happiness, joy, and sunshine. So these are all colors that we often associate with fall. Hey, it's fall. We see the pretty colors on our trees, and the first day we kind of see those going to work, we're all really happy, and it's in your overall day feels a lot better. Orange also evokes childlike exuberance. Negative connotations still can be somewhat aggressive, okay, since you are still kind of close to red, and orange is still a color that represents fire. It also symbolizes ignorance and deceit. All right, yeah, did you know that? Maybe not. Yellow. Yellow is another happy color with positive qualities like joy, intelligence, brightness, energy, optimism, and happiness. So also just like red, it's going to have similar negative feelings, but we're getting more and more positive as we get farther and farther away from the actual color of red. So it also, negative feelings include caution, criticism, laziness, and jealousy. So we've all seen caution tape out around a construction zone. So kind of similar to red, it's used to catch your attention and tell you to, hey, slow down a little bit and think about, where you're walking or where you're heading. So negative feelings include caution, criticism, laziness, and jealousy. So next we have green. We're now breaking into another part of the color wheel. We're starting to be towards the opposite side. Green symbolizes nature, as it also has a healing quality. It is associated with growth and harmony as well as nature. What's really interesting about the word, or about the color green, is that a lot of the meanings behind the color have been sort of now been associated with other things like green building. When we think of the color green, or I'm going green, a lot of the qualities and the emotions that are evoked have similar qualities in that sense as well. So it's an interesting word of all of the ones, or I'm sorry, an interesting color out of all the ones that we're talking about today because of those reasons. It is also symbolic of money, even though the only reason why, does anyone know why money was termed the coin, or was actually started being called green? Anybody know that? Well, obviously money was sort of green. Our money is actually drifting further and further away from being the actual color of green. But really, the United States was actually the country that actually coined that concept, or that term, green. Okay, you actually heard it a lot in like hip hop videos and whatnot. But if you go all across the world, most money is actually not green. It's actually various other colors. The euro is what, blue and several other colors. But most money is actually fairly colorful. Some of the negative connotations about the color green can show greed or jealousy. Has anyone watched that show, is it American Green or American Greed? American Greed, but it's all about money. So you can kind of see the correlations between the two different ideas. Actually a really good show if you haven't watched it yet. Green can also be used as a term to coin to coin someone who is also a beginner or has a lack of experience. So if anyone has ever watched Deadliest Catch on Discovery Channel, you've heard the term greenhorn, okay? They use it on a lot of companies. It just basically says that you are a beginner or you don't have a lot of experience in what it is that you do. Next we have blue. Blue is peaceful and calming. Blue is peaceful and calming. It exudes stability and expertise, often used in big corporations. Okay, big corporations like Dell. Okay, Dell is a corporation where their fundamental color is blue. If you look at Yahoo, actually Yahoo is actually purple or actually red, then purple. But there are a lot of other big companies that use the color blue as their main color. We'll actually look at a little chart today of like 150 logos and where they all fit into the color spectrum. And then including the White House. So blue, if you were to go to the White House website, which I have a slide up in a second, blue is also used in the White House website. Even though, regardless of whether or not the particular president is Republican or Democrat, it's been blue for a very, very long time because it has connotations of stability, okay, and peaceful and calming. So that's kind of part of the reason why the White House chose that color. It also symbolizes trust and dependability, okay? All kind of thoughts around what the White House thinks it's doing. It also, negative connotations, includes depression, coldness, and passiveness. Okay, so that's going to be the color blue. So here's an example. This is actually the White House website when Barack Obama was the president. But if you go there today, I actually went to it a couple days ago. It's still blue. It's still blue, even though our president has changed. He's not necessarily, or he's not a Democrat, but they still want the overall feeling of the White House to have those same feelings that we were just talking about a second ago that are related to the color blue. So here's just a little example. We actually took that same website and we changed it to red, okay? So this is actually just took it into Photoshop and changed all of the text from blue to red, or all of the colors from blue to red. It has a different feeling to it, doesn't it? You know, it's not dramatic, but it does have a little, it feels a little different when you go from blue to red. Next, we have the color purple. Color purple is mostly related to royalty and sophistication. And the reason why that was because way back in the day when, we didn't quite have the technology that we did like we have today, purple was a really, really expensive color. To actually get the color purple, it was really, really expensive. They had to get it from, what was it, like sea urchins or something like that? Or it was something, it was like the method of getting the ink for purple was extremely, extremely, extremely tough. So it made it really, really important. So over time, the color purple has been a symbolism for royalty and sophistication, which is why you see, Crown Royal, the alcohol, it comes in a purple bag, or you associate, you see the big old kind of velvet cape over royalty, which is purple. It's always been symbolic of royalty and sophistication. It also gives a sense of spirituality and encourages creativity. Okay, it's also associated with healing and feminine qualities. Negative connotations could exude gloominess and sadness. Okay, so that's the color purple. Black is correlated with power, elegance, sophistication, and depth. Okay, if you've ever, for those of you that are in the architecture school here, and if you've had crits with other architects, that's kind of partially why architects in the past have always worn black, because of the power and sophistication thing. It's kind of a common trait that a lot of architects are always kind of on a power trip. I see it all the time. They're not all like that. I don't think. I try not. Hopefully I'm not like that. Hopefully someone will tell me. But that's kind of a thing that a lot of people associate architects with. And if you work with a lot of them, I can say that a lot of them certainly are. Unfortunately, black is also associated with death, mystery, and the unknown. It is the color of grief, mourning, and sorrow. White, so opposite of black, is symbolic of purity and innocence. This is why when two people get married, the bride is always wearing white. They're wearing a white gown because white represents purity. Okay? It also shows cleanliness and safety. All right? White can be cold and distant and symbolizes winter's harsh and bitter qualities. So, here's a really good quote, and hopefully everyone will think about this for just a second. Research reveals that all human beings make an unconscious judgment about a person, environment, or item within 90 seconds of initial viewing, and that between 62 and 90% of that assessment is based on color alone. So this is all the subconscious thought that is going on in your head that you don't even know is happening, but it's happening, okay? You do judge people. Everyone judges people subconsciously. And they're saying 62 to 90% of that is based on color alone, based off of what they're wearing, what they look like, etc. Okay, it's a fact. It's proven. All right, so this is our little color emotions guide. All right, so last class we all created logos. We talked about company logos, and we kind of we looked at about probably 50 different logos. Well, here they're all broken up into all of the different colors that we just talked about, and the overall feeling that is supposed to be associated with that particular color. Okay, so if you look at these, I would say probably like 75% of them make a lot of sense. Some of them are kind of like, okay, why'd you do that? But for the most part, they all make a lot of sense. So you go way out here in the outer realm, we have diversity. Companies like NBC, Google, Microsoft, okay, all of those companies don't really want to be associated with one particular side. They don't want to be left. They don't want to be right. They don't want to do anything. They want to really want to appeal to everyone. Okay, they're saying they're diverse, and they don't really cater to one specific emotion. Okay, you go down to the very bottom. We have gray. Of course, you see apple in there. Okay, you go down to green. Green is a peaceful growth and also a color that symbolizes health. John Deere, oddly, a lot of these things have to do with growth. Okay, so we have John Deere, Whole Foods, Tropicana. Kind of a funny one is BP. BP is, I guess they do a lot of good for the world, but they also, we've all heard the BP problems. So then you also see colors like blue, Truss. So these are all really big name brand, very powerful corporations. AT&T, Dell, American Express. These are all very stable companies. Okay, companies like Coca-Cola. We've all seen a Coca-Cola ad when we're watching the Super Bowl, and you have the polar bears come up, and you want to, or the puppies running across the snow, and you want to go and grab one and you want to cuddle it, and it's supposed to evoke that kind of warm, cozy feeling. It's also supposed to be exciting. All right, so you guys all see the point. Yellow. Most of these brands all sell something. It's kind of the reason why behind yellow. So here's a couple case studies. So the first, we're going to talk about Yahoo. So here's Yahoo's webpage circa 1996. Okay, this is the very basics of Yahoo. The internet hasn't been around for much longer than this. 1996. Let's see. Where was I in 1996? Some of you may not have been born yet, so you don't remember this. But I do remember having my extremely slow dial-up internet, or I should say my dad had extremely slow dial-up internet, and watching the Yahoo page load about every 3 minutes. You would get like a little bar where a little bit of this came in. But the thing to pay attention to for 1996 is the color of the logo. Yahoo, excitement, right? So it's a new thing, it's a new brand. All the color of the text is blue because that's just the color of what links were at that time. And you'll see that for a little bit. Okay, so next, 2000, 4 years later. 2000, I'm a freshman in high school. 2000, I'm a freshman in high school. We still have the red Yahoo logo. Okay, so it's still exciting, it's still new. They still have the blue links because that idea still hasn't changed. But a new idea has been brought into the internet, and that's the idea of shopping. And notice that they've put, this big green bar around Yahoo Shopping. There's a reason why they do that, because it's so associated with money and spending. All right, so 2003, Yahoo is now about, they're like 10 years old at this point. Okay, I noticed that they've now included, it's still exciting, they got lots of cool stuff coming, but they've now incorporated blues and purples. Okay, so they're saying that they're now a sophisticated company, or they're claiming to be a sophisticated and settled company. They're doing well, they're making lots of money. This is the big boom of Silicon Valley, and lots of money is being made. All right, just a couple years later, the internet's getting better, a lot more blue, a lot more purple. All of our headings are now blue. This happened to have been around a time where it was Valentine's Day, so you see the Valentine's Day ads. Okay, so 2007 is when Yahoo said, we want to be like Google. Google is very simple. They have their name, they have their search bar, search, that's it. Okay, that didn't last very long. Obviously, this is absolutely hideous, terrible. That lasted for about 6 months, and then they changed it. 2009, you can see their logo has now changed to purple. They're very sophisticated. They're doing really, really, really well. They're making lots of money. They're very stable, and life is good for Yahoo. Okay, so now mostly we have hardly any blue, and we have a lot more purples in our overall web page. Okay, 2013. I'm not going to talk about every one of these, but you can kind of see how this is all changing. 2016 and current. All right, so of course we're going to talk about Apple as well. We love talking about Apple in this class. So this was 1997. Steve Jobs is not, even though he was the founder of the company, he's not particularly involved at this point. But look what we have. Just like Yahoo's initial page, we have red. It's exciting, it's new. They're trying to introduced this Apple brand. Okay, it's amazing how far we've gone in terms of internet and the browsers. So that's 1997. And then Steve Jobs comes back in 1998, and he reinvents the idea of Apple and what Apple is supposed to represent. He simplified it. He simplified the user experience. We now have mostly white, very little color. Still have a little bit of color, but the color is actually, in this case, used to create a little pop of color for the product. So they're actually very much product. They're much more concerned and focused on the product than the actual web page. So they're using the color of the product to be the pop and to be what your eye is drawn to. Okay, so that's Apple circa 98. All right, same kind of idea here. Believe it or not, this was actually the computer I was talking about last class. The computer that arrived to my house. I opened it up, but ours was actually teal. If you remember, did anybody else have one of these computers back in the day? There was purple, there was teal,
Green.
there was green, yellow or orange. It was like an orangey yellow, huh? I think.
Smoke color.
Oh yeah, and the smoke color. There were 5 colors. But the point is that there's a reason why Apple chose purple for this particular image. The whole user experience is very white and very clean, very clean. It's the whole idea behind white. Notice that the logo is red in the upper left-hand corner. Same year as Yahoo. Yahoo's logo is still red as well. But there's a reason why they chose the purple computer versus the blue or the yellow or the red one. Okay, because they're now claiming themselves as a very sophisticated company. They're trying to place themselves in that upper echelon of products, and we all know that Apple is definitely a much more premium product these days. All their computers cost twice as much as every other Windows computer on the market. So they're representing themselves as a premium brand. 2001, they had Adobe Illustrator 10. They've got to be on like Adobe Illustrator 25 now, even though they don't call it that, but they definitely are. So notice that their logo has now changed from very similar user experience, mostly white, mostly gray, little bits of pops of color, but notice that they've they've changed their logo from red to blue. Okay, so we're going down that same path that Yahoo went down in terms of the creation of their website. All right, notice that as we get up closer to 2004 is when the iPod came out. That was a big thing. That was a very premium product. You had some money if you had an iPod, because you were spending like $300 or $400 on this block that you could just put in a ton of music on. Notice that our toolbar up in the top is very glossy, where you're starting to get that two-tone glossy look. When we looked at logos last class, that was one of the things that we talked about, was that little era. All right, so 2006, same upper toolbar, all black, whites, and grays. 2007, we kind of have that, graphite looking toolbar up here in the top. The Apple logo has that sheen to it. I think this is the iPhone 3GS. This is actually totally mind-boggling to me. Up until last year, a guy in my office had the original iPhone. I walked over, I saw it sitting on the desk, and I was like, no way. Even this, he said, yeah, it still works. Still works fine. Original iPhone. It actually looked worse than this. Very similar to this. But it's crazy. It's crazy how much the world has changed. But he still had the original iPhone. And actually, at that time, was actually selling my old iPhone. He bought it.
Which one?
He bought my 6S. So big, holy cow, his life is probably so much different now. But it was the original iPhone, and it had internet. That was just a complete breakthrough in terms of what you could do with a phone. Okay. So 2011, Apple. 2013, our toolbar has changed, but the overall, actually, which one was it? I think it was September 18th, 2013. Does anybody know who Johnny Ives is?
He's the designer.
Yeah, he's the big designer for Apple. He's credited with a lot of the big successes of Apple, and a part of that big success was changing the overall theme of the Apple brand. So this was the date that they went very flat and very monochromatic. They started to get away from the whole glossy logo thing. Okay, iOS 7 came out. All right, you still see a little bit of it in the toolbar, but as we get closer, this is also the time when the internet took the turn of the big full page browsing. All the pictures went from edge of screen to edge of screen, so you had lots of big bold content, so which is what you see here. All right, 2015, notice our toolbar is now just gray, no glossiness whatsoever. All right, 2016, and that's basically where we are today. All right. This is today, 2017. Very black, very simple, very monochromatic. All right, so research reveals that all human beings make an unconscious judgment. We already talked about that. I'm not going to read it again. Okay, actually, I will read it again. Research reveals that all human beings make an unconscious judgment about a person, an environment, or item within 90 seconds of initial viewing, and that between 62 and 90% of that assessment is based on color alone. So continue to think about that. So today, what are we going to be doing today? We're going to look at a couple different websites. Mostly the first, actually I don't know if we'll have time to go through the second one, but we're going to be looking at Peloton and a website called Color. Okay, color.com and peloton.com. We're going to use both of those to talk about or to create color swatches, to which we will use to derive our Charley Harper theme from. Okay, so today's exercise is going to be broken down into a couple different parts. The first part is going to be to find a Charley Harper example image that you want to base your assignment after. Okay, so you're going to have to be doing a little bit of research, spend 15, 20 minutes Googling Charley Harper example images. You'll find dozens upon dozens of them, and find one that you want to kind of stem your project over. The object of the assignment is to not copy or replicate the Charley Harper image that you find exactly, but it's to create kind of a deviation of it. Okay, so create something similar, use the same organizational tools as what maybe you saw in the example image, and you're going to have to create a couple different, a part of today's assignment is you'll have to create a couple different color palettes, and you're going to end up using those color palettes for your assignment 4. Okay?
Google Charley Harper, the pictures and the Charlie Sheen in his show pop up.
Oh, interesting. Well, make sure Charley is actually spelled Charley versus Charlie. I think if you probably spelled it both ways, you'll still get examples, but his name is actually spelled a little bit differently. So here are some sample images, and let's just kind of talk a little bit about what makes Charley Harper so special and why it relates to what we're doing in the class. Okay, so here's the first image, Charley Harper's Birds and Words. What's something that you guys notice about his imagery and why maybe it relates to what we're doing? Anybody?
It's very graphic and shape.
Yeah, exactly. It's very graphic and very shape-oriented. You'll notice that everything that he does is very two-dimensional. He doesn't really, he doesn't use shadow. He doesn't use, gradations of color to show depth. But he actually thinks of other more two-dimensional ways to do that. So you see very simple blocks of color in all of his imagery, okay? And so you're going to want to use all the tools that we've learned so far in Illustrator, the pen tool, all of our different shape tools, use the tools that we learned last class, the Pathfinder tool, and all of those will be great tools in terms of assembling your own Charley Harper variation. But some other things to pay attention to is the overall composition. So when we talked about composition in the class, we talked about the rule of thirds and some of the other methods. You'll notice that they're all very visible in his imagery. Okay, if you break down this one here, you'll notice that the sun, the head of the bird, kind of the focal point of the page is on this side of the image. But you'll also notice that he has lots of repetition in a lot of his images. Okay, so you see this leaf here. This same pattern that you see here is just replicated here and here and here, and there's a little bit of kind of spottiness to just kind of give them a little bit of variation. But when you look at the bird, the bird is broken down into very simple shapes. You have this shape here, which is very much of almost nearly identical shape as the leaf. And then you have this very simple shape here. You have some triangles. There's another triangle, circle, and then you have the wings. Okay? Here's another example. We have the circle. All right? Remember the rule of thirds? You know, most of his images, you're never going to see the content plopped right into the center of the image. Okay? Because he very much is very thinking about composition all the time. If you look at the circle, he has multiple variations of the circle, but used in different ways. Right? Here we have a leaf. Here we have another type of leaf, and then he takes that same circle. It's the same size as the body of the bird, and then the bird is actually broken down into some very simple geometry and shapes. Okay? Again, repetition. So we have the idea of the turkey vulture, all exactly the same, and the last one, he just mirrors it. Okay? So he's kind of showing movement in a different way. And there's probably a reason why that this instance right here, the instance of the two birds, they're facing each other, the head of the snake is kind of in that kind of 1/3 golden ratio area. There's a reason why he did all that. This is probably one of my not as much of my favorites. It's very much the composition I wouldn't say is the strongest, but what I want you to actually take from this particular slide is about how he actually expressed movement, okay? So he's trying to show movement by this kind of fluttering of the different shapes, okay? So, that's not what the bird's wings look like. It's probably really only like one of these, but he's showing kind of this blend of that different line work to show movement, okay? So I won't talk about all of them, but you'll see a lot of the very similar qualities in a lot of these other shapes. Okay, also look at how he expresses depth. Okay, he actually does create depth in a very subtle way. If you look at this particular image here, you see that the ladybugs feel like they're on top of the lily pad, and then you have some holes in the lily pad, and then you have water, and then you have this kind of complexion in the water, and there's somewhat of a depth aspect to his imagery. All right, the squirrel, if you break it down into all of its basic shapes, you have one here. His leg is broken down into that little shape right there. His arm is broken down into this shape, etc., etc. Okay, just a few more. I think we'll have actually a couple of class examples. This is actually another great one in terms of depth. Okay, notice that the snake kind of overlays and crisscrosses with the lily pad. And then you have the fish underneath the ripples of water. So great example of how he shows depth in his imagery. Raccoons. Ladybugs. That's the man himself. So here's a couple examples of student work. Okay, this was done I think 2 semesters ago. The idea of the ladybug. One thing that is a little bit different, everybody always kind of applies their own little twist to their assignment. Some of these, are still great examples. They're great examples. They probably got an A on them. But for example, in this particular image, one thing I wouldn't say is super Charley Harper-esque is kind of the squiggly lines of the blotches of colors. He used a lot of very straight and rigid lines, lots of arcs and curves. He didn't do, for example, if he was trying to show a tree, he didn't do, this to represent the tree. He actually did, something like that, and then he had some kind of other shapes that helped create composition and depth and character to that tree. So.
On canvas or in Charley Harper's work?
Say that again?
Are these paintings or are they designs?
All of Charley Harper's imagery. This is all, by the way, this is all in like the 50s. So not computer generated, all done by hand, pencil, colored pencils, paints, things like that. So yes, they're all on canvas. But that was just kind of one little detail that caught my mind. Still a very good image, compositionally great, but that's not really so Charley Harper. It's a really good one. Sea turtle. Mostly because I love turtles. Has anyone ever seen a sea turtle in real life? Yes? Did it not blow your mind? I saw one for the first time on my honeymoon about 6 months ago, and I was snorkeling in Kauai, turned around, and this thing was like 2.5 feet from me. And this thing, the current kept on taking it, and it's amazing seeing one. It really is. I actually have a video of it. I pulled out my camera, my underwater camera, and this turtle's face is like 6 inches from my camera. This is a good one. I wouldn't say this is A work. Fairly simple. There's not a ton going on. This is probably a good B. Great line work, great color scheme. That's all fantastic, but I wouldn't say it's on the more difficult side. Okay, so speaking of difficulty, that's something that I am going to start to grade more and more. So when you think of what you're going to do for your particular assignments, don't necessarily say, okay, I'm using the pen tool, I'm creating some shapes, and I'm done. But start to think about in terms of level of difficultiness. Okay, this is a good one. Not super Charley Harper-esque. Notice the gradation of color in the bamboo. He wouldn't have done that, but still a nice, successful image. The fact that was done with the pen tool is great because I'd love to see that. Another student example. Charley Harper definitely did not create baboons with a knife, but funny.
I think those are his fingers, right?
Right here.
Is that a knife?
Oh yeah, it's a knife.
Oh.
It's like a machete.
Weird. It's a remake.
That's a great one. It's actually a really good one. I like that one a lot.
That one. Charley Harper has that.
Yeah, that might have been like a duplication.
Yeah.
Just kind of the redo of the raccoons. You guys recognize that one? That's a really good one.
That's why they're here.
Lots of raccoons.
About 15 right now.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Not super Charley Harper-esque, but really great one. Okay, so that's it. That is it. It's 7:30. Let's come back at 7:45, and then I'll quickly show you a quick tutorial. It'll take about 10-15 minutes, and then we are all done. You guys can get started.